Alrighty there, what's up? You know, when I look towards working with professionals or experts in their field, a lot of times I'll look to find out, what would they do in their position, right? What would you do if this was you? Would you do this on investment strategies or anything? It could even be building a fence around the house, right? What would you do for your house? And I thought that it would be great to share, what did I do when I bought my first home? I was 29 when I bought a home, and I know that's not as young as some people. And I've seen a lot of great videos out about people talking about, I bought my home at 25, what did I do to buy a home? And there's some good strategies and different, takes on that. So I thought, hey, why don't I share with you what I did, an industry professional, an expert in the field, and what was it like when I bought my first home? So in today's video, we're gonna talk about what was it like when I purchased my first home. All right, now, truth be told, had I not worked in the mortgage industry when I purchased my first home, I think that this would have been a lot further off. I don't think I wouldn't have thought of purchasing a home as soon as I did. And primarily that was because it was so far removed from the world that I grew up in. It was, to say I came from modest beginnings is putting it lightly. Grew up very poor in a position where, even in my situation, my family lost our house when I was a senior in college. We didn't, our home was foreclosed on, and I had to move out and live with my grandmother for my senior year in high school. And I didn't even know what that meant, right? I wasn't really well versed in the mortgage industry at that time. It was something that I learned at a later date. So, as you can imagine, buying a home wasn't something that I had thought about as much. Now, given that, there was still a lot that brought a lot of importance to this to me as well, though. I will say I've always had this, somewhat of a chip on my shoulder, I think, to prove, that I'm not only good, but I'm good enough. And this was one of those notches in the belt, if you will. Buying a home, I know that was something that meant something when it comes down to trying to show status in life and things of that nature. Now, I didn't buy my first home because of any of clever insight, right? I didn't create a rent versus own schedule that I sent out to one of my marketing partners. It wasn't anything other than, I think the main driving factor, I just wanted a cool place. I really was looking for a cool place to live, and I did find one. The first condo I bought was amazing, had multiple balconies, had a lot of wow factor, and I did end up spending more than I originally was looking at. So I think it's important to note that when you're considering your budget, you want to have a very honest conversation with yourself about what you're willing to pay. If you're willing to pay a little bit more, it might be easier to find the right place out of the gate before you miss out on it. So in my position, I thought, okay, I'm looking to buy a home. I'm in the mortgage industry. You really do need to be, I think if I'm going to be working with people and talking about the importance of owning a home, then I should own a home as well. Didn't have a lot of savings. Now this was in 2004. I'd been in the mortgage industry for just, 3 years or so, not even quite, maybe 2.5 years, going on 3 years. So I had income coming through, was successful in the industry shortly after my first year, but there wasn't a lot of assets, wasn't saving a lot. So I used a very low down payment at that time. I used 5% down. So when I bought my first home, it was more about just getting across that finish line. I was very confident that when I owned a home, I'd have no problem paying for that, and that I'd have no problem being in a position where I could make ends meet. But I was definitely a little bit short on the cash and pushing to get that down payment, but I wanted to move sooner than later. So I put 5% down, and I used a split loan. This was a very popular product back in 2004. We would split the loan into an 80% first mortgage, 15% second mortgage, not only because it avoided PMI, but also because it allowed for a better interest rate, better monthly payment. And I was really focused on making sure that, being in a commission-driven industry, I wanted to make sure that I kept control of that. So I was payment conscious, even though I was confident. Let's just say that. Going through and looking at my place now, it was an interesting. It was definitely an interesting process. Even though I was handling my financing, I was still incredibly anxious. Now, I had been through this at this point in time. I'd helped a lot of people buy homes, and I was still, it's funny because going up to that point, I used to think like, well, what's the big deal? I would talk with people, they felt nervous, and I understood, but I didn't understand, and I thought it was something that you really had to experience before you knew what was going on, because even though I'm handling my financing and I know what's going on, I know where we're at in the process, I was still in a place where I felt this anxiety. It's like I wanted to call and leave myself messages at like midnight and be like, what's going on with my loan? Where are we at? And there was some hiccups, you know, when I'd gone through, I'd been looking for a home for quite some time. And by the time that I had found a place, I had to update everything on my file. My credit had expired. We weren't using soft pulls on credit at this point. This was different. So my credit expired, didn't think there was any problem. Well, my credit score had dropped by 80 points going through and looking at this. I pull my credit to go to get my loan approval. I'm under contract. I'm moving on getting a home inspection. I'm making commitments on this, and all of a sudden my credit score is too low to qualify. I had a gas bill that had a late payment. Now, it wasn't my gas bill. I had received a gas bill for the entire building I was living in, and I wasn't about to pay for this huge bill because it wasn't mine. And when I talked to the gas company, they agreed. They said, yeah, you should not be paying. Don't worry about it. You're not going to have to worry about this. Don't pay that bill. We're going to get this straightened out and get you the right bill. Well, like a lot of organizations in the world, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And we're in a position where, lo and behold, collection was put on my credit for that gas bill. And this had made a huge impact. And one of the biggest reasons why that impacted my credit score the way that it did is that I didn't have a lot of credit, right? I had one other credit card and a car loan. And car loans, installment loans, they only have the initial impact on your credit. They don't actually continue to build credit for you. So this one credit card, let's just say I was not very well insulated, right? So this left my credit vulnerable. The credit scores dropped. Now, fortunately, because I was in the industry, I was able to go through the channels that it took to get that fixed, right? I was in a place where I was like, okay, kill them with kindness. I got the credit score improved. I had that late payment removed because it was a mistake, and I was able to buy my home. But it was one of those early on situations where I got to see firsthand how you have to be prepared. You have to be proactive, right? And I talk about this in a lot of my videos. I lived it myself. It's not something that we talk about in our industry as professionals as a way to try and get people to move sooner than they're ready. It's just trying to make sure that people are taking the steps and learning from the mistakes we've seen other people make. And in this case, a mistake I had made myself. So interesting enough, I only owned that home for not even 2 years. I purchased this condo, and it was a beautiful place. I loved living there, but things had moved quickly, and I was continuing to grow in the industry. And also, on a completely different topic, I've been a professional musician my whole life. I was living in a condo. I'm a drummer. Playing drums in a condo is not the best way to try and accomplish your craft, or let's say, or practice your craft. So I quickly wanted to move on to a single family home. Perfect timing, though, I got to tell you. I know that you can't time the market. In this case, it worked out really well because I sold my property and closed in the beginning of 2006 on selling my property and then buying my new property. And as a lot of people are aware, there was a huge issue in 2006. We're in a place where we watched the market crash, and this was due to the housing market. The housing market actually was a driving factor in that. And I remember I was in a place where I was under contract to sell my property, and as I was under contract, I started seeing other properties come up on the market that were, equal or better in better locations, places where they should be selling for more, and they were actually asking less than what I was under contract to sell my property. So I felt that anxiety. I was like, oh, I hope that this closes. I hope that I don't have to go back onto the market because that could be a big problem. And simultaneously, at the same time, I was buying another home, moving on to a single family home. I do want to share, and the reason why I think that was relevant, I bought my first home with 5% down. I used a split mortgage. It worked out really well for me. I was able to sell my home, and I made a profit. I made a big profit, actually. It was more than I could have hoped for, and I was able to move on to my next house. However, when I moved on to the next place, I also put 5% down. Both times I used ARM programs. I used an adjustable rate mortgage because that was the best option for me at the time. I knew that being in the industry, I would have the ability to try and control when I might want to refinance that loan, and I felt more comfortable with that. So going through and looking at this, purchase number 2, I went ahead, I put 5% down, used a split loan again on this, and I kept that home for 14 years. It was a great place, but it also worked out really well. Not only because of the time that I held that property did I see appreciation, I was able to take advantage of those benefits, right? So it really was a winning situation for me. But also when as that appreciation grew, I was able to go through and, I no longer had 15% out on a second mortgage. I was able to use that for future investments. I could draw on it once I paid it down. So it worked really well. Now, this isn't a strategy, right? This video isn't talking to you about this is the clever way that you can go through and you can use this or that. And some of this may not even be relevant anymore when you consider if you want to split the loan, because the benefits aren't the same. But if you're wondering about what someone like myself did when they bought their first home, well, hopefully this gives you some insight and, we get to know each other a little bit better.